I've got the board muted. It says no out. That's full battery. Took out 2 chairs and still feel like they're too close. Problem is, it won't be visible if you're in these outside chairs. Yeah. So we can make more of a pronounce.
Maybe we should have one at each end.
Yeah, let's do that. They're both unmuted currently.
Test, 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 test. Good. Test, 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 test.
Okay, hear that. What's that?
1.
Great.
Test, 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 test.
We're good, thank you. Lectern?
Test, test.
All right, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Just an update to let you know we are letting a few more folks come in, so we should be starting in just a few more minutes. Thanks so much. mic here. We'll pass it. Sounds clean. Do you see how to turn it on? Perfect. Green light is green to go. Okay. How are we?
We're just going to give just 2 more minutes if that works out for everybody here, and then we'll get started with what we hope is going to be a great conversation. I think I'm ready. All right. So I think we'll get started, and I want to introduce myself. My name is Toni K. Manskow. I live in Rochester, Minnesota. I think we live in a wonderful community, and I really want to welcome everybody here, and we're going to have a great conversation tonight. That's what our goal is. So the first thing I want to do is I want to thank the sponsors of this event tonight. We have AARP of Minnesota, 125 Live. We have Christ United Methodist Church, who's hosting us here tonight, Family Service Rochester, Age Friendly Olmsted County, and then there's a couple of national groups. They're called the Patient Advocate Foundation and the National Patient Advocate Foundation. And so thank you to the sponsors. We really appreciate the support that you provided for this event. And so our conversation tonight is going to go until about 7:30. And what we're going to do at 7:30 is we'll have everybody that we're going to be meeting downstairs. There will be refreshments that will be served. And we have quite a few exhibitors. And on the back of the program that you received, we have all of the sponsors and exhibitors that are listed. So if by chance you aren't able to visit with all of the exhibitors, you've got their contact information and their website available. So again, we just want to make sure that everybody has this readily available after you leave today. So just to give a little bit of background on this event is I had the opportunity prior to COVID. Does anybody remember life prior to COVID, right? Yeah. So prior to COVID, I had a group that had flown me out to Washington, D.C., and it was the National Patient Advocate Foundation that I've been a volunteer with for about 9 years. And they said, we want people to come to Washington, D.C., and they had what was known as a story slam. And if you've never had an opportunity to attend a story slam, it's a lot of fun. So I was able to share my family caregiving story in our Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C. And as a requirement for that, going out to Washington, D.C., I had to come back to my community and come up with a project. And this is that project. So it was scheduled initially for April of 2020. And if we all can remember, COVID, March of 2020. So the event got canceled. But I think as time goes by, we've learned a lot through COVID, and we're going to be able to speak to how that's impacted caregiving. So this will be a great conversation. I do want to take some time to recognize anybody that is attending that is running for public office. I'd like you to stand just so that we can see who's here. And I want to applaud you. I want to thank you. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And this is an opportunity to hear from people that are involved with caregiving. And sometimes when you hear caregiving, you think of family and friends. But we've got a lot of caregivers in our community, where it's our healthcare professionals that are in medical centers. We've got teachers that are in our schools. We've got daycare providers. We've got people that work in group homes, people that work in assisted living or skilled nursing. So you've got a really broad spectrum of caregivers. And at any point in someone's life, you may be turning into that role of caregiver. So this event is hopefully going to provide some guidance. We'll share some of our lived experiences on what being a caregiver has been like. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to show just a short video that my parents, they've died now, and before their death, when I first really started to fall into a caregiver role, I had the opportunity to work with AARP on a video related to caregiving, and my parents helped with that. So Kirkland, I'd like to show that video, and I'm waving. Kirkland's up here. He's one of our lead pastors here. All right. Hi, Carol.
Hello. My parents, they've always taken care of 7 kids. And about a year ago, the roles kind of changed to where my dad was hospitalized and my mom was also hospitalized around the same time. It was really tough because it's like I didn't want to be the one to have to make all these calls or set things up. And then I started to question, am I actually making the right choices? I think that we were looking for information, and I don't know if that communication occurred with other family members, but I know that there were times when my mom was dismissed or my dad was dismissed that we were looking for resources and we just didn't have it at our fingertips. There needs to be more support, and there needs to be one place that family members or caregivers can go for that type of information of what services are available. I don't know if that communication is occurring, but I didn't experience that. I will do anything to honor my parents' wish of wanting to be in their home, and between my brothers and sisters and I, we've done that.
So I'm so grateful that I have that video of my parents, because when I miss seeing them, I can look back. And they really have contributed to some improvements for caregiving in our community. So we're going to have Jenny Cannon, who is one of our pastors here, do some welcome.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Reverend Jenny Cannon. I'm one of the pastors here at Christ United Methodist Church, and it is a delight to welcome you here tonight. Christ UMC, along with, I know, many other organizations and groups in this community, recognizes how important caregiving is in so many aspects. And we recognize that there's a crossroads. And we hope that tonight that this is a chance to really sit in that crossroads and to hear all the ways that our stories and our resources can intersect in powerful ways, that we can help to lift each other up, to make information available, to make issues more visible, and have a chance to really connect personally, but also to connect the various groups, stories, and organizations that we represent. So thank you so much for your participation here tonight and for the continued conversation that I know will come from this evening. We want to begin with a short poll to find out who is here tonight with us. And so in just a moment, you will see on the screen, for those of you who may be familiar with Menti.com, we'll be using a Menti poll. So if you happen to bring any kind of device with you, an iPad or a smartphone of any kind, then we invite you to go to www.menti.com, and you can put in the code 1668752, 1668752. I'll say that again, Menti.com, and you can let us know who you are, a family caregiver, a direct service provider, a healthcare provider, or a really big category of other. So you can go to Menti.com. The code again is 1668752. One 1668752. So this will just give us a little bit of a sense of who is in the room. The category on the far left, I know that's pretty tiny font, is family caregiver. The pink column is direct service provider. The red is healthcare provider, and yellow is other. So you can see right now that other category has the most responses, followed by family caregiver, direct service provider, and then healthcare provider. And maybe it would be helpful, we could leave this up while we do introductions, and so that would be a good visible sign of who's in the room as we continue on.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, so we have our panelists with us tonight, and I'll let them introduce themselves. And so as we go around, what I'd like to have you do is introduce yourself and then give the audience just an idea on what your connection to caregiving is. And we will start to the person that's on my left.
My name is Carol Stiles.
Oh, here, let me give you the. All right. And I think.
My name is Carol Stiles, and I was formerly the Director of Social Work at Mayo, and since I retired from that position, I've been working on a Mayo research study specifically about caregiving, and I will be glad to talk a little bit more about that later. I should also mention, I also work 1 day a week at Olmsted Medical Center, treating mothers who are referred for postpartum depression.
Hi, my name is Melissa Adrian, and I'm a peer recovery specialist working with individuals that suffer from substance use disorder. I'm also a grandmother of 14 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren.
My name is Kathy Scheid. I'm the executive director at Elder Network. We've been in the business of caring for elders and their caregivers for 34 years. Our mission is for those 55 and better and their caregivers to thrive and lead rewarding lives.
My name is Holly Brown. I also work at Elder Network, and I'm the program director there. I've been working with family caregivers for 15 years, and really happy to be here and share my insight on what I've learned working with family caregivers and how to navigate.
My name is Annie Mack, and I work with the Diversity Council. I'm a director of equitable community design, but I'm also here tonight as a death doula and a daughter who wants to share her mother's story and journey, and hopefully give some understanding to what a death doula is and the support that they offer in the space of palliative care, and as our loved ones are transitioning to death from this space. Just kidding.
Hello. Michelle Priggin, I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Cardinal, Minnesota. Cardinal is based here in Rochester. We provide services to primarily adults with disabilities in Minnesota. We serve about 80 individuals in our in-home program. We serve another 150 or so individuals in our 44 community residential settings or group homes. I've been with Cardinal in this role for about 3 years. I've been with the organization for 8. And I kind of grew up in this industry. Some of you may know. My father is Jack Priggin, who's also the founder of Cardinal, Minnesota, and my mother is Buff Hennessy, who is the former executive director for the ARC Southeastern Minnesota. So I remember childhood and teenage years volunteering at Special Olympic events, ARC fundraisers, and Cardinal client picnics in my backyard. So thank you, and thank you for hosting today. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, everyone, for that introduction. One panelist that couldn't be with us, and she got a hold of me this morning, is someone that is not feeling the best, and we appreciate her not coming if she's not feeling good, but Becky from Benedictine Living Community is not able to join us, but she sends her best wishes for the success of this conversation. So thank you. Well, we're going to start out with some questions, and I just want to start with Michelle. Michelle and I, we've known each other through the years. I've got a brother, his name is Travis, who is a resident of one of the Cardinal group homes. And for my family, I don't know what we would have done without Cardinal. So I wanted to have Michelle just kind of talk from the overseeing a program like that. And you know, you've worked in the field for quite a while. I know prior to COVID, COVID's always on my mind, right? Prior to Cardinal, you also worked in a home for individuals with Prader-Willi. Yeah, so you've got some great experience. So how's your work been impacted recently or through the years, and just kind of what are some of the issues that Cardinal struggled with?
Yeah, thank you. So I have worked in this field for about 15 years. I started as a direct support professional at Cardinal. We call them our delight specialists because it's their job to delight our clients and stakeholders every day. And it's unlike today anything I've ever seen before. I know that for many of the elected officials in the room and others who are connected to this industry have heard this message time and time again, but we are experiencing some staffing shortages that we have not experienced before. And I know that through caregiving, I mean, education and youth and mental health, that is common. I think what's hard is do you know or understand what a group home looks like, and the people behind the Minnesotans with disabilities that we care for 24/7, 365. So, you know, we do have the pleasure of serving Travis in one of our homes, but like I said in my intro, we also serve 149 other individuals with disabilities physical and intellectual, that have a team of people, delight specialists behind them, that are ensuring that they lead and live high quality lives. That high quality of life is not possible without that team of people, in effect our workforce. Cardinal employs just over 400 people, and the most of them, we call them the 300, provide day-to-day care, direct support to those people with disabilities. We talk a lot in the legislature about wages and a really complex funding system and how wages help us to attract and support that workforce, so that they have the ability to live in the cities that they work, to continue to provide for their families. I think what's been most impactful to me, and really in a lot of ways kind of heartbreaking, is the number of people that in the last 2.5 years or so have not just left Cardinal, but have left the industry because they are entirely burnt out. They're exhausted. They have given so much of their own lives. They're these people that I would consider caregivers. They are among the most compassionate, hardworking individuals that I know. And they don't have anything left to give to others, that, in particular, the clients that we serve. So I think that it's important for me to speak to any of our candidates or elected officials today that I know you know what's going on. I know that we've been loud about our message and what we need as it relates to funding and wages and wage increases. But I'm really asking you, particularly after the midterms, to do something about it, to show me that you know, so that I can continue to employ a workforce that is healthy, both with us as their employer, but in their home lives as well.
So, Michelle, I know a lot of your staff have worked double shifts or long hours just to keep the homes open. And one of the things that was tough was hearing how you had to close some of your homes. And, you know, I never thought in Minnesota that we'd ever be in that situation of places like that closing, but they did. So how has COVID impacted these issues?
Yeah, I don't think that Cardinal ever intended to downsize either. If you didn't know that, March of 2022, Cardinal downsized its organization for the first time in its existence. We closed 11 of our, at the time, 55 group homes. That impacted 27 adults with disabilities in this community, between Olmsted and Winona County. And again, a lot of it stemmed from the staffing shortages, and at that time was really a crisis. Our industry is citing between 30 and 35% workforce vacancy. And again, I know that there are workforce vacancies across our communities, across different sectors. I think what's different in our industry is that when you have workforce vacancies, there are real people relying on your services that are no longer being served. But we had seen too many people leave the organization, leave the industry. We were not seeing it on the applicant side. We had done a lot to reallocate resources and dollars toward bringing people into the organization and bringing people into the industry, and it wasn't effective. So that and our decision to mandate the COVID-19 vaccine at the time, also, we were expecting to lose more individuals from our organization. So yes, we downsized from 55 group homes to 44 group homes. That in some ways has helped, but we still see those workforce vacancies. I think what's difficult is really in the heart of the pandemic, when other parts of our community were shutting down, the negative impact that it had on our services as well. So if you guys are familiar with disability services, many of the individuals that we support also go to school, they have jobs, they lead a life much like you or I would with assistance, right? And so when their churches were closed, when their schools shut down, when their jobs shut down, many of the individuals with disabilities that we support, they had nowhere else to go. And oftentimes, those were also points in their lives that they may not have needed our staffing. And so when those access points, those other parts of their lives closed to them, Cardinal was really responsible, the only option left for providing services. That meant an increase in our hours, thus without the additional staff, the additional delight specialists, meaning it was me, it was my senior leader team. Every member of our workforce was working direct care around the clock. And as Tony mentioned, in some cases, 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week to ensure that these individuals had a safe, happy, healthy environment to call home.
And I think that there's still some of those lingering effects of like employers for a lot of the residents. For my brother, he's not able to go back to work yet because they don't have the staff at his day program.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so grateful for our disability services community. Many of the individuals that we support also have jobs at Possibilities and ABC here in Olmsted County, and Opportunity Services. And alike, they haven't been able to find the staff either to support them in their jobs, in their job programs. But I think also a number of the contracts that they had prior to COVID. For example, ABC may have contracted with a school, a church, or even the Mayo Clinic to work, right? That then ABC would employ an individual with a disability to complete a particular task or project. And through the pandemic, because of labor shortages and output and so forth, those contracts were lost and they haven't been able to regain them. So not only do they not have the level of work to be able to employ people, they're also short with staff and unable to bring back their workforce as well. I can't tell you the number of virtual bingos and craft nights that many of our houses had during the height of the pandemic. And while I'm incredibly proud of our workforce and the resilience of many of the individuals that we serve, I can't imagine that being a very fulfilling lifestyle for one day in and day out.
Yeah, it was really tough when we'd go to visit our brother and we're waving to him through a screen door because you had to be protective, and so your staff did a great job with everything that you were dealing with.
Thank you.
Yeah. And now I can picture in World War II, I think, we had Uncle Sam that had the "We want you." And I think in Olmsted County, we need a poster with the Yammy Bear saying, "We want you," just to see if people that are retired or people that have 4 hours, to give a break for staff. It'd be great. Yeah. Those "We want you." Yeah, so we had Becky that was going to be here. All of the individuals on the panel had an opportunity to talk with each other, get to know each other. And Becky was going to speak to some of the issues that a lot of our assisted living and skilled nursing are running into. But I think, Michelle, when we were talking with her, there was so much overlap on the staffing, the wages, the burnout, that I think if she was here, she'd be saying all that you mentioned were issues. And just to kind of use an example, for my mom, who was in a assisted living during COVID, to have to move her to a skilled nursing where she went into hospice, and this was just last year, as a family, we had, we were taking turns going in to spend time with her, and half of the staff in the skilled nursing facility were temporary workers. So we never knew who was going to be taking care of her. And I think that that is something very similar for Cardinal of, you've got people that you're just trying to cover the staffing shortages in homes. And there's a lot of shuffling to do that. And again, I don't know how you guys did it, but you did. Got creative is what she said. Yeah. So anybody else want to, I mentioned skilled nursing, assisted living. Anybody else want to just share a perspective on what you feel? I mean, Annie, with your role as being a death doula, that was something that I had never heard of before. I've heard of birth doulas, but you worked with palliative care, is that right? And
Well, so, excuse me, my story is that I had a mother. My mother, passed away in 2006 from kidney failure, and she was doing at-home dialysis. And so this is all going to come together. And so she actually passed away in her home, but she was not receiving care in her home, but she was doing at-home dialysis. And so when COVID happened, I, at the time, was a professional musician, and I had finally transitioned from working as a server to actually making my money as a singer-songwriter performer during that time. And as we all know, everything stopped, and so my work stopped as well. And I went to a space of really having to examine what is something that I had been really afraid of and wanted to learn more about and to honor the journey of my mother and sister, who both passed away and were treated very with negligence because they were women of color, they were Black women. And so during this time, I started to think about death, right? And I started to just really examine the process of death and how that looks and what happens when individuals die alone, and if there's something that's out there that in the same way will walk with the person as they transition from this life, much like that of as we welcome the sweet children that come into this world. And sure enough, in doing some digging, I came across Death Doula in 2020, and I was just infatuated, and there was so much examining and questioning of how my mother could have been taken care of better, and my sister, and understanding hospice and how it works, and the lack of resources that were presented to my mother and sister, and the fact that they did die alone and they were not receiving active care at all. And so during that time, I went through a class on Death Doula, and what that means. And so in the practice of that, there's a lot of beautiful work that goes into it, where you walk with, where you walk with families and who, it could be terminally ill individuals who are in a hospice setting. One of the things that I was really surprised to learn was that hospice is not just for actively dying individuals. It's actually, you can receive, once you know that you are sick, it's to support you in pain management so that you're able to be present for your family and enjoy your life as you are transitioning in death. And so my mother was not receiving treatment. So imagine going to appointments and being on at-home dialysis, and you have a whole team. You have doctors, you have nurses, you have all these individuals who are aware of access to resources, and no one mentions anything to you because they don't see you, because your life does not register as important to them. And so the shame and the guilt that I carried in understanding through training as a death doula, I just started to examine, and I was heartbroken to know that hospice is really to support, and they come into your home and it's free. And that was something that was not presented to my mother and my mother was on a transplant list. So once she was on that list, that at that time is when there should have been a plan made for care. How can we support you so that you can be with your family and be present? How can we, and so those were the things that I learned about, and I realized that there is such a disparity amongst BIPOC individuals, LGBTQIA, who don't get to have a good death. They don't get to leave this world knowing that they are cared for and seen and heard and loved and respected culturally. And so that is what motivated me to learn about being a death doula so that I could meet the needs of my community, and for those who are from marginalized communities who do not get to have the support and see themselves reflected in their environment, in the medical environment.
Yeah, I'm relating to what you're saying on, for my mother, we were taking turns, but yet we were so exhausted that she did die alone.
And the beauty about a death doula is we are supposed to come in and to support and to help so that you're able to have really intentional time with your family, your friends, or just be in preparation as you transition from this earth. And so, to have a person come in that has no connection to family or the dynamics, as we all know, when death comes into the picture, there's a whole bunch of things that are revealed about family dynamics and what happens. So you have that individual in there that really just wants to serve the individual who is transitioning to death, and also serve the family and kind of neutralize things. And sometimes there's a space to say things that would not be able to happen, or to have influence in a way, or to offer legacy work, or to think about things differently, or just to simply sit and to be.
Mm-hmm. There's so many different cultures that we can learn from on death with dignity, and I think one of the things that you brought up when we were talking was about who are these individuals that are working in our skilled nursing, our assisted living. And we have a lot of individuals that are from, I'll just give examples, like the Somalian community, the Cambodian community, that the way that death is approached in different cultures, wouldn't it be great if we could bring that into our everyday and learn from those individuals that are caring for our loved ones?
Right, I would agree. There's so much to learn from other cultures who embrace the journey and the understanding of death, and to do it in a space of beauty and what is sacred. To also be a person of color who is to just be familiar and to have someone, who understands and who can, recognize the different cultural practices that come along with that is really incredibly important. And also, historically, BIPOC communities have suffered greatly in the health realm. And so there's this understanding that if you did not treat me well when I was here, if you did not acknowledge me, if you did not respect me, if you did not hold me sacred, if you did not show me love and compassion and kindness, I cannot trust you in my most vulnerable space as I leave this world, right? And so you have individuals who are not stepping in, and when you're ill, when you're tired. So the advocacy that is needed for BIPOC individuals is actually incredibly important, because for those of you who understand the exhaustion that comes with being sick and having to make decisions and having to think about all these things, and you're not able to just focus on being present and preparing and just having those moments or having that time. So the need to see the representation and the care of BIPOC individuals, immigrant community, LGBTQIA is so important, so that we can have a good death with integrity, and not have to do it alone. My mother and sister both passed away alone, and I have to trust that Spirit was there to meet them and walk with them. However, as they transition, that is one of my greatest regrets, was that I was not able to be there and to know that they were not in a space where someone was able to be with them.
Now, I'll say for my mom, being in this church, she was a member of Methodist community and played some of the instruments here, piano, organ, through the years. But her faith is, as I look at when she died alone, I knew that she was solid with her faith, and I'm so glad that she shared that with me because she instilled that within me, and so the things that we can learn from people, our elders, or as we're growing, if we just kind of listen, right?
Right.
Annie, I just want to step back, and can you, for the audience, just define BIPOC, right?
So it is, I'm not always the best with my acronyms, but it is Black, Indigenous, people of color. It is covering all the browns and all the individuals that we see in our community that do not get proper recognition, thank you so much, respect as being a part of our community. And so we speak, I come as a Black individual, Black descendant of slaves, and just realize that the major disparity gap and historically what's taking place within the medical field. And so just understanding that there's a whole culture that goes with the care of the dying. And to know that my mother, because of what she looked like, was not considered worthy enough to have access to, it was not seen as worthy. And this happens quite a bit, that even in her dying, her life was not considered to be worthy enough to receive those resources or have anyone to step in to share that with her. And so that is a very devastating thing to know.
Mm-hmm. And then Kathy. Here.
Yep.
So I have a comment and then I have a question. And I want to share that palliative care is a good resource in the community, and you are part of that. And palliative care often doesn't get started for people early enough. And that's part of the problem, is people don't want to talk about it, they don't want to face it until it's so late, it's difficult. So one of my questions for you and is, when is a good time to have invite a death doula into the what is going on? And before you answer, I just want to tell everyone that I really encourage you that if you're diagnosed with something that could be life-threatening, that the time that you receive that diagnosis is when you should really start talking to palliative care about the services that they can offer that go right along with the treatment that you receive. And that hospice can be brought in so much earlier than many people use it. Oftentimes they'll bring them in a few days, maybe 5 days before. And like Tony mentioned, when you're in treatment, you have this huge team of people supporting you, but once treatment ends, sometimes there isn't much support. And so what Annie is offering is so important, but for everyone, start so much earlier, make a plan. And so when should you come in the picture?
That's a really great observation, I know. So to me, and if you do find out, if you understand that you do have time, and our thoughts of hospice is okay, within 2 days, and that's not the case. Once you are unable to work, once your quality of life starts to change, once you realize that you're independent, just various things, or you're in chronic pain, or, and those are really uncomfortable conversations. Once again, a death doula can help with that, or your resources. That's when you should look for support. And I had the opportunity to walk with a friend who passed away from liver cancer. She was a mother of 3, 42 years of age, vibrant, beautiful, tough as nails woman who, and she was a white woman. My friend was white. And once again, in processing the treatment that she received and what the resources were for her were in my struggle of being grateful to be there and walk with her, I struggled tremendously with seeing what she had accessible to her up close and personal. And I had to go into a space of being like, Annie, this is education for you. This is, right? Like I had to separate those feelings. And so, and when they started the hospice for her, and it is with respect, it could have probably been started a little bit sooner, is when, she needed support with her pain management to be lucid enough to have conversations with her children later on in the day. It allowed her to go outside. It allowed her to try to continue to have really great quality of life while understanding that her body was actively in the space of dying. So that's a conversation that I think intuition and having people around you who are able to say, how are you doing? Are you getting into the bathroom? That's the communication, right? It's very humbling. And my friend was very prideful, but when we went from, she would talk to me about going to skiing trips. I remember that we rejoiced when she got up a flight of steps and we had to take breaks. She'd get up on the first step and I'm like, come on, girl, come on. Because she knew she could still do something, then she was still here. And so that is when the team came in and they were able to, the pain management, and able to have those conversations of the care. And so when your quality of life, when you realize that simple things that you're no longer able to do, make dinner for yourself, and she was sharp mentally, but her body was starting to decline. And there's really great resources that do talk about when is the time to start, but it's really to help just enjoy, time as you still have it.
And just for the audience, I want to give a definition of palliative care. Just an easy to understand definition is you can view palliative care as an extra layer of support for the patient and the family. And on a palliative care team, you can have a doctor, you can have nurses, you can have a social worker, you can have a chaplain. They really are the team that when you have, maybe you have many specialists. Maybe you've got a heart doctor, a kidney doctor, cancer doctor. When the family is with their loved one, and it's the middle of the day and there's a question of, hey, does anyone remember which specialist we called because this happened? You can always call the palliative care team. That was the great thing. It's an extra layer of support for family and friends.
And they're there because they want to be there. It's a calling, I really believe in that. Those of you who experience the treat, you understand, And so it's really beautiful to see how, what integrity looks like in death. And that sometimes it is, like, for instance, a death doula will help with the legal things that are very uncomfortable to talk about, and how do you show love to your family? How do you show, and it's making sure that if you're able to, your affairs are in order. Coming in, and so watching that process with my friend and being up close and personal, and the team that came in, even a massage therapist that was able to come in and just to alleviate and allow, and it was really beautiful to see that. And so once again, it kept me in a space of, we have individuals where that's not possible. They're not even going into care, facilities. And so, Death Doula is really beautiful. Look it up. And thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah. So you did bring up, and I want to make sure that we get to the questions. We have prepared questions, but you have an interesting conversation. You brought up a great point, and maybe some of the others here can share on having that conversation, right? So for my dad, when he was at the end of it, he was on end-stage heart and lung disease, made that decision. He had a palliative care team. He said, I'm stopping treatment. That was a time that was a little hard for the family to accept. There's 7 kids, right? We all had our opinions. But we had those conversations, right? Where, growing up in a family of 9, your mom, dad, 7 kids, we didn't talk about this stuff. But we made sure that when we knew that our parents were ill, that, hey, things are not going the best, we better all get together. And we better figure out which family member has strengths in one area or another. And I will tell you, with my dad, right before I had to make a decision on something that I knew I'd never talk to him again, I could go back to that paperwork that we had developed, and I could say, this is what he wanted. With my mom, same thing. When she just couldn't make decisions, I could go back to that paperwork. And it's important that you have those conversations. And I think that's what I thought of.
Absolutely. The conversation of release, honoring what people say, and understanding that that's the whole conversation in itself, right? Being able to let go in love, being able to honor their journey, their choice, what that shows up as, what that looks like. And I think it's really powerful to start having conversations about death in a way that's really beautiful and really powerful and humbling, and not feeling like you're being blindsided or not feeling the need to overly control things either, but allowing things to be as they are, and walking. And then there's people that can walk with you in that process to help, define and to see what needs to be done. And it's beautiful. We're fortunate enough to have the knowledge and the time to put into that. That doesn't happen all the time. And so, death is something that I think, to have a good death and to treat it with the same integrity and importance as we do with birth. Right. And those are, for me personally, as a mom of 3, and I've experienced a lot of things, and I think about what is legacy, what do I want my kids to know, what do I want the world to know, how did I show up, these are the things. And so I think there's a beauty in being empowered enough to go into those spaces and to really examine what that looks like. And how do you want to, go, like, how would you like to, do you want to be surrounded by flowers? Do you want to hear your music? Understanding visualization, my eyes were just open, and I'm still learning what that looks like and how we can handle things. And so be encouraged that something that seems very intimidating and very mysterious as it is, there is a way to go about it with humility and grace and understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, so Holly and Kathy, I'm going to bring you in to this conversation here. And Elder Network. I know it was so helpful for my parents when they were living in their own home, where the services that you provide really made the big difference for them being able to stay in their home. So do you want to just talk a little bit about how do caregivers find the resources that they need? But Holly, I know that you had a follow-up in regards to Annie, so we got to go back.
I did. I'm sorry. Is this on? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
It's hard with the mask. I just couldn't help but feel overwhelmed to just quickly share my own story when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And having worked at Elder Network and having led cancer support groups and just being empowered to know the resources in the community, I brought up hospice, and my family looked at me like, what? Like, how can you say that? How can you say she's ready for hospice? And as you guys were speaking earlier about bringing these things up early, that's what I was trying to do, was trying to give my family some extra level of peace that I knew hospice could provide. And it was really, really tough because my family felt that I was telling them that my mom was gonna die tomorrow. And she was still 1.5 years out from actually her passing. But I just knew how powerful hospice could be, and I wanted that for them. So I was just feeling compelled to just, share my own story of, it's not easy to bring up stuff, but in the end, we did have hospice, and they were fabulous, and they were exactly what we needed. And she did die with dignity, and we were there as family members and not her medical team, which was perfect, for us. So I just wanted to quickly share that. I'll hand that back to you.
Okay. Well, we wanted to kind of set a little bit of context around seniors and caregiving in that we are experiencing a huge growth in the number of seniors 65 and older, and just a couple statistics, not to overwhelm, but almost 1 million people in Minnesota are 65 and older right now. And by 2030, we expect that number is going to double to 1.3 million elders, 65 and older. And by 2050, we expect that the number of 85-year-olds will triple. And so the demand for caregiving and caregiving services is going to need to grow exponentially to support this need. And so it's going to be pretty tough, I think, for organizations. And so part of what Elder Network and many nonprofits here do is not only do we provide services to help people, in our case, stay in their home, whatever that definition of home is for them. It could be their own home, or it could be independent or dependent living and so on, but also is to support caregivers so that they, if their family or friends or even neighbors are providing caregiving, that they can stay strong and feel confident so that they can caregive for as long as they choose. And that's really important because I'm not sure how else we are going to deal with this huge growth of the older population and the needs that they are going to have. And so I'll let Holly talk a little bit about how do you get the resources and prepare yourself so that you can age well in your home, and so that caregivers can provide the services that someone's needing and feel confident and take care of themselves too.
Thank you. So in my experience, having grown up in this community, we all have a variety of ways that we learn about something that's new. And if you're like me, you don't start looking for that service until you absolutely need it, right? So in my experience working with family caregivers, like I said, over the last 15 years, it's been, well, my friend used your service, somebody at the clinic told me about you. We were driving down 7th Street and saw the Elder Network name and thought, I wonder what they do. A lot of individuals are Googling information, and just by putting in senior services in Olmsted County, things are popping up, whether it's the senior linkage line, whether it's Elder Network, whether it's adult day programs, whatnot. It's word of mouth, one way or another. And I think being able to ask for what we need is number one. If we don't know, how do we get to know? And so we start asking people around us. I've never been in this situation before. I don't know who to turn to. I don't know what's out there. And the more we're willing to talk about what we need, the more I think we're able to get navigated to what's out there. And with Elder Network, we have a variety of programs and services, and I'm happy to be a part of a lot of our caregiver programs, talking about support groups and coaching caregivers through difficult times, navigating for them from where they're at to where they want to be, really just listening to what their situation is. And, as we were talking earlier about the staff shortage in a lot of the home programs, the residential, even in assisted living and others, what I've tried to refocus for myself as a coach is to help caregivers find out what can you still do. And if you can't get the medical help you need to bring your person home, and you're going to have to step into maybe a scary or new avenue of service, which is preparing a wound care, dealing with bathing, dressing, medication management, things that are really important and things that can be very labor intensive. I say, if you have to step into that role, maybe ask somebody to help you with the non-medical things. Give somebody else your grocery list. Let somebody else mow your lawn. Let somebody else do your dishes or make you a meal every once in a while. Because it might be easier to find people to do those types of things than to find the people who have the skilled medical training that we're all seeking, in our communities. And I'm working with caregivers right now who are afraid to bring their parent home from a hospitalization because there is no rehab bed, but there's also no in-home health care. So they feel trapped. And they say, I can't bring so-and-so home. I don't know how to do all those things. And I'm not going to sleep at night because they need to have care every hour. I need to change their position or clean their wound or whatever it is. And it's very scary and very overwhelming. And because of what we've experienced because of COVID, we've really had to change how we support our family caregivers. And so being able to talk about self-care, we probably hear that all the time, right? What is self-care? Well, that is so varied for each and every one of us. And so working with your friends and families who may be in that situation, whether they're a professional and just feel like I'm not getting enough of my own time, it's learning how to be able to balance, which is something we're probably all trying to do anyway, but navigating what's out there, not waiting until you're in crisis, and accepting the help that does come. I hear from caregivers all the time, well, people always say, oh, if you need anything, just give me a call. But then when I do, they're not available. Or what I really need, they can't provide me. And how frustrating that must be for them to feel like, well, I finally made the courage to call and ask, and then I get rejected. And it feels like a rejection instead of just, I'm uncomfortable doing what you're needing. Or my life has also changed and I can't do, what I thought I was able to provide you. So it's really being aware of how we can help each other and what we're willing to accept in terms of help, and recognizing that sometimes what we think we need, we have to look someplace else and accept it from a different way, and it might be just as beneficial or helpful in terms of that. Our agency works very closely with the Senior Linkage Line and Disability Linkage Line here in Olmsted County. And I know that the Senior Linkage Line Area Agency on Aging has a booth downstairs with us, and they are a gamut of resources and information. And when I'm working with long-distance caregivers who will call and say, I Googled senior services in Olmsted County because I live in Texas, but my parents live in your community because they came for medical reasons, but we don't know anything about your community. Can you navigate and help us, on what we would need to look at? It's really helpful to be able to say, well, we have the Senior Linkage Line and you can contact them. They can provide you a ton of resources, and if you need more hands-on, we're happy to provide that. So sometimes people don't know what they need, or they need a plethora of things. And being in an agency that can help them be connected is really powerful, and it helps us feel empowered that at the end of the day we know we're helping people that really need it and are so thankful for what's out there. But I just want to say, don't hesitate to ask for what you need, and be open to the support that you may be getting back, even if it's not quite what you were asking for. It might just be what you need in that moment to keep pledging through for what is to come as a family caregiver.
And I would just add that at most states you can find an area agency on aging, and so they're a great place to start. They can be a clearinghouse. In southern Minnesota, we're very lucky to have senior advocates, which are also partially funded by in our case, we have a senior advocate in our office that's partially funded by the Area Agency on Aging, and they are advocates and information and resource referral staff. They can come out to your home and help fill out forms, help get information to help you with housing applications and things like that, because housing applications can be 35 pages long, very difficult and confusing, as well as any of you probably can tell me about insurance nightmares. And so senior advocates in southern Minnesota are available in most counties and can help with those particular things. The Area Agency on Aging, any state, you can find resources. And also 211 through United Way is also a good way to get some additional resources. And in Minnesota, we have minnesotahelp.info, which is a database that if you're comfortable, scrolling for your own resources, that's a really good place to look for things as well. So I have to say that I think we're quite lucky in Minnesota, and especially southern Minnesota, with navigation supports.
Kathy, you mentioned insurance, and I just want to let the audience know that I work with cancer patients, and any patient or family that I talk with, they are going to hear about a group that's known as the Patient Advocate Foundation. They have a booth downstairs, and I refer everybody there because their motto is solving insurance and healthcare access issues. So if you would know of anybody that's struggling with insurance issues, a denial from an insurance company, maybe a medical bill you're not understanding, or you're looking for financial resource information, they provide free case management. This is all across the United States. Free case management for individuals with any chronic disease or life-threatening illness. So if anyone in the audience, anyone here is looking for that type of information, we've got some great resources downstairs. So I just want to Carol and Missy. Carol, you've worked with caregiving research, and I think you discovered some really interesting things through the time that you've spent, but also with your background as a social worker, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the research?
Well, I was very fortunate the last 4 years to be working on a research study funded by NIH, the National Institute of Health, and it's a Mayo-conducted study, and I need to tell you a little bit about it. The title of it was, I always have to write it down to make sure I get it to describe it. The title is Technology Enhanced Transitional Palliative Care for Family Caregivers in Rural Settings. It's a real mouthful, that's why I have to write it down. Over the course of a little over 4 years, we studied over 400 caregivers, I think it was 430 some, in caregivers in Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. And they were selected because they lived in a community with a population less than 50,000. The caregivers were in the study for 6 months. There were 2 groups. There was an intervention group and a control group. The intervention group were provided support by 2 palliative care nurses, and they did it with iPads. The caregivers were given loaned iPads, and it seemed a little bit unusual. At the beginning of the study, we wondered how that was going to work. But as the pandemic occurred, technology became much more commonplace, and so they provided support to the caregivers over an 8-week period, by providing counseling, teaching, and guiding. And then there were the control group, both groups were followed for 6 months, and I was the person in the study that talked with every caregiver monthly for 6 months. They also completed surveys at various intervals during the 6-month period. Anyway, we gathered an enormous amount of data, as you can imagine, and the data, we've just finished with our last caregiver in July, so we're currently just in the process of analyzing that data. If you can imagine, over 430 caregivers over 4 years. So the information that I have is anecdotal, based upon my interviews and information that we collect, that I was privileged to collect over those 4 years. And I don't know how much detail you want me to.
You know, when we were talking, some of the things that came up were how caregivers were struggling when they had a loss of income. And then also what you were hearing is that there's a need for affordable respite care.
Okay.
So maybe the financial piece and, you know, just the need for addressing that.
Well, finances were a huge issue for all of these caregivers. And bear in mind that we had caregivers were there were a variety of family members and friends who were caring for the care recipient. A majority of the people, and I don't have the specific data, but were elderly. And they were being cared for either by a spouse, an elder spouse, or by younger children. And so the children were most typically employed. And that created a real dilemma because some of them, if there wasn't anybody else, they had to quit jobs. The pandemic occurred in the middle of this study. And so what happened, as you all know, is that people started working from home. And in some ways, that was a real benefit for our younger employed caregivers because they were able to work at home. They didn't have to give up their job. But it also created some real dilemmas because if you can imagine trying to manage employment plus caregiving, and as our colleagues from Elder Network have told you, sometimes that is incredibly onerous. It is not just a matter of being in the house. You are providing hands-on care, sometimes 24 hours a day. So they were managing jobs, although they were lucky to work at home and didn't have to give up their job. They were managing multiple things. And of course, they also had families. So they were trying to manage things with their families as well. The other issue, I jotted some of these down so I wouldn't forget them. I was afraid that I would. The other thing was the cost of medical equipment, hospital beds, lift chairs, expensive medications, and many of them had to make alterations in their homes, were very expensive. So there were lots of financial demands as well. There was a lack of availability of respite care, people that could come in and provide them some relief. And before I talk about that, I need to mention that because this occurred during the pandemic, most of these caregivers were incredibly isolated because they were caring for immune-compromised patients. So they were suddenly isolated from all of their supports, other family members. People were dropping food off at their door. One man told me, he said, I just a little bit like having an ankle bracelet on your ankle, and that you literally, they could not go anywhere. And so there was, even if they could have had respite care come in, because their patient was immune compromised, they couldn't have anybody come in. But in cases where that wasn't the situation, there was a lack of availability of respite care, and what was available was extraordinarily expensive. And for the great majority of Americans, you probably know this, while they may have some income, it makes them ineligible for Medicaid and some of the other safety nets that are out there. And the cost is for respite care or for care to come into the home is too exorbitant, or most of them cannot sustain the cost of that. So getting respite was almost impossible. Another thing I remember encountering, and this was fairly common, and it was particularly true of women, wives who were caring for their spouses and they were older, they were very uncomfortable having anybody else in the family or any stranger take care of them. There were lots of intimate cares that needed to occur that they only felt comfortable with their wife providing. And so that created another burden, as you can well imagine. I'm trying to think, I don't want to miss something here. I know Kathy, you both, Holly both mentioned that many of them talked about being ill-equipped to take on caregiving that they knew nothing about and felt they weren't trained or felt frightened of doing. The other thing that we became very aware of was that caregivers were neglecting their own self-care and their own health care needs. With two really significant things that happened over the course of the study. One of them was a woman who had put off her mammogram, and one of our nurse practitioners in the course of her 8 weeks with her really pressed her to go in and get a mammogram, and she had breast cancer. And I honestly think she would have put it off and not taken care of herself, because her husband, the husband she was caring for, had enormous needs. And it meant driving into Rochester, which was very difficult. She had to find someone who would stay with him. So those, and I think just denying their own self-care was a really serious problem for most of our caregivers. Walking, of course the gyms closed down, but they weren't taking care of themselves. And things that they were normally doing, they had to give up. They had to give up hobbies, things they enjoyed doing. Their lives changed dramatically over the course of the time that they were in the study.
Mm-hmm. So Carol, some of the things that you mentioned were, it's related to finances and like medications, medical supplies, all of that. I'm just going to provide another resource for our audience here. My mom's cancer drug, when she started out taking it, was $130,000 a year. We were able to find some grants. So for people in the audience that are struggling, trying to pay for prescriptions, there may be some assistance out there. And a lot of the exhibitors downstairs, I know Patient Advocate Foundation, I think you'll find me at that table. We may be able to help you with some of that. Medical supplies, there's an organization, it's called Needy Meds. It's NEEDYMEDS.org. They may be able to provide a reduced cost on medical supplies. So again, there's resources, and that's where we wanted to have a resource fair. So if anybody has any questions, I just feel free to ask any of us, because we're here to help with information. So Melissa, who also goes by Missy.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to call her Missy. You know, we've heard a lot about caregiving, you know, the struggles within family, friends, and all of that. And the beauty of the work that you're doing is, I think right now, what is going on for when people have a diagnosis of cancer or heart disease or whatever, we can learn a lot from people that are connected with the recovery community. Because the recovery community, when you think of people that have struggled with substance abuse, mental health, there is that supportive network.
Yes.
And so that's something that it would be so great to have as a model where it could overflow and help a lot of these different groups that are trying to put some type of supportive network in place. So can you tell us a little bit about just the work that you're doing as a peer recovery support specialist? Because I think we're going to end on a positive note and learn from that type of work and what a support it can be for others. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm a woman living in long-term recovery from substance use challenges. I've been in recovery for 10 years, and the peer recovery role was created because there was a break in between all of the resources that we have for to have continued care. We have treatment, we have drug courts, we have the mental health therapist, but they suffer from lack of community skills and lack of community connection. So the peer work is that I meet with individuals from a lived experience, and so we try to build the bridges to all of the different resources. I've been working out in Dodge County, so I'm in a rural area where we don't have access to as much as Rochester, and what I've been finding is when someone graduates from drug court, when they graduate from treatment, and they are still on probation, we have all of these different services, but they seem to all quit at about the same time. So then they are stuck without learning the lived experience, how do you live in this world? I didn't know how to live in this world without using. And so when all of those resources quit, our role is to continue working with individuals on a person-centered place. There's a lot of there's a lot of different resources, and we also have the stigma that we have to, the challenges, the stigma of addiction, and so there's a lot of age gap where individuals do not get the same kind of care and treatment as if you were here in the city here, or if you didn't have that label of drug addict.
So other communities, they've talked about COVID and the loneliness. So what does that, I'm just kind of wondering, how does loneliness affect someone's recovery?
I had kind of a bird's eye view on all of these topics. One of the individuals I work with, she's 61 years old, has been an alcoholic and was a nurse for her whole life. She was a single mother. She lives in a 62 and up disability home. And throughout that time, I continued to work. So even if I had to go stand outside her window, I would do that, because of that loneliness, so it will drive us back to using. And so she's in an apartment complex where there's 17 apartments, and there's different levels of disability in those apartments, and there's nobody coming in taking care of these people. Part of the connection that we've created as peer supports is how do we help our neighbor? And so I've seen the loneliness. I've seen the mothers, the wives trying to take care of the husband who can't do anything for himself. We've cleaned apartments because they can't get in there and clean. And that's just services that we've seen the need and just want to be of help. But when we call and we'll ask for different resources, there is none, unless you're headed to assisted living.
Yes, so I know for recovery, there's that anonymity, but yet when you're part of that community, it's family. And the tough thing, and I think Holly and Kathy, we talked about this, and about the distance, right, of caregiving from a distance. And it's not like, years back where the people I went to kindergarten with, I graduated high school with, everybody knew everybody. And I think what we can learn and the messaging that can be helpful in the community is we really need to be helping our neighbors.
Yes.
You know, and if you're aware of someone struggling, offering that help and sincerely offering the help, because it sounds like, you know, you're just in passing, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing okay, you know, and just asking. And that's really going to be something that can make a change within a community. So I'm not sure where we're at, what time. I did shut my phone off, you know, just, yeah. But in closing, I'm wondering if we could go around and you could offer one piece of advice for caregivers. Just real briefly, if you had one piece of advice for caregivers. And let's start with Carol. Okay, well, there we go. There we go. One piece of advice.
Oh, this is really hard. I can think of so many things. You know, what happens is that most of the caregivers, I think, don't have a lot of time to prepare for this. It's kind of sprung on them. Someone has a disability that they didn't have before, or a very serious illness. And so I think we all need to be thinking ahead and planning, especially if we have family members who are older, like I am, and thinking about what are the contingencies, who's available, what resources are available, and I guess that would be my bit of advice.
Okay.
Mine would be self-care. I did have a situation towards the end of COVID where I had to take about a month off of work due to not being spiritually or mentally in a place where I was doing good. So I had to take a month off from work. So self-care, you can't pour from an empty cup.
I would say plan ahead. If you're planning for retirement, at the same time, plan for aging in the way that you want to age. And that means getting your home, maybe, if you want to age in your home, getting your home set up so that you can live in it long term. Getting your finances set up, power of attorney, your living will, and your financial house in order, who's going to support you. All of those things are just as important as that retirement fund. And I'll put in one plug for a website called The Conversation, which is a wonderful place to learn and have a structure around talking to, for instance, your aging parents about what their wishes are. And that kind of conversation isn't a one-time thing, you know, like you write your will. It's something that you have over time. And it can be uncomfortable, and the conversation website can give you some really good structure to have that conversation. And then you turn around and you tell your kids. Now that you've learned, they don't have to come to you with the conversation because you're going to teach them. And what a gift that is, because if you've ever experienced where you don't know what somebody wants and now the decision has to be made, it is a terrible burden on people who love you. And so plan ahead.
Mine's more personal. I'd say don't live in guilt. As caregivers, we feel guilty for everything that's happening to our care receiver, and we take it personal. And so being able to remind ourselves that we're enough and we're doing the best that we can, and that if we knew how to do things differently, we probably would. And so to just, at the end of the day, remind yourself that you are doing the best that you can in a very difficult situation.
I would say to all the recovering caretakers, and we all use the proper language, but there was a time where you were a caretaker and there was an association of a lot of resentfulness and just, but so my point is take the help as a caregiver. When people want to step in and they want to buy you a meal, send you to a massage, whatever, take help. They want to show up, they want to take your kids to work, school, whatever it is, just receive the help so that you can continue to do what you do, because there's so many people who see you and they want to support you, and sometimes it's in really practical ways. Let them fold your laundry, because you didn't want to do it anyway in the first place, right? So it's like, put the pride down and receive the help, you know? So, and I'm talking to myself. So.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the sentiments given here, but I also would say just be proud, loudly and proudly, for the work that you do as caregivers, particularly caregivers in disability services, who I think sometimes get overlooked in the vast world of caregiving. I hear a lot of times, even from my own workforce, I'm just a staff, or I'm just a DSP, or I'm just an overnight. And I wish for you all to be able to see what I see, some of the most resilient and talented and compassionate people. And I think that your community needs to respect and recognize you for your hard work and talent. So thank you.
I think if I had to offer a piece of advice, I would say keep knocking on the doors, right? Don't give up. But also recognize the power of your voice, okay? And for me, when I was caregiving for 5 family members, I was going to speak up because I didn't want anyone to follow in my path and struggle. And you need to be speaking up, and that's how change is going to happen. And enough of the taboo subjects of we don't talk about money, or we don't talk about death and dying. We got to speak up. So that is my piece of advice. So do we have a question for the audience, I think?
We do. I think we're going to skip that, and we
Okay.
are going to continue on to make sure you all have a chance to check out the amazing resources downstairs.
Thank you.
And so I want to make sure to thank Tony for her leadership and for her vision in this project.
I can't wait to hear how I get graded on this project, because this is being live streamed, and there are people from the National Patient Advocate Foundation that they'll give me a grade. So thank you very much to
Absolutely,
the audience.
absolutely. And thank you also, especially to our panelists, for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
Our motto here at Christ United Methodist Church is to be a place of grace in the city. And in our tradition, grace is invitation, grace is transformation, and grace is also healing. And I hope that this has been a space where there has been some grace tonight, and where that can continue to take place. So thank you so much for your participation. The Caregiving resource fair can be found downstairs, and so as you head out the back doors of the sanctuary, the elevator and the stairwell is right outside the doors, and we'd love to have you join us down there. There's refreshments, as well as many, many tables and resources reflecting some of what we've talked about here tonight, but much more as well. So thank you again for your presence here.
Yeah. Thank you.